Hi, Charlotte.
Hi Ellen, good to see you.
Happy Friday. It's nice to see you
Happy
again.
Happy Friday.
Yeah. So we'll do like little intros as we're introducing ourselves to each other's audiences. And the reason that we're having this conversation today is we actually met in person in London at an event for online educators, entrepreneurs. And yeah, we connected. We decided to have a chat on Zoom, and here we are having our second or third chat on Zoom, but recording it. And yeah, I love you. You run signature frameworks, and you talk and think about signature frameworks. And I run Authority Club for helping people figure out their expertise. So very aligned. Excited to dig in. Do you want to give your own version of your introduction as well? And I can do the same.
Yeah, sure, Ellen. Thanks so much. Yeah, it's really fun to have met you a few months, weeks ago in England in the summer. Actually, it was a really beautiful view, wasn't it? At the top of a big
Yeah.
sort of skyscraper sort of building. So it was really lovely to meet you there and to continue our conversation together with our kind of overlapping interests. Um, and yeah, so I run a company called Signature Framework, and I help experts package their expertise into a framework that is signature to them. I help them codify what their expertise is, help them visualize it so it's really compelling and easy to understand, and help them leverage their intellectual property so they can become the go-to expert in their field, and build their authority, scale their impact, and grow their revenue. So yeah, that's a quick summary of what I do. And I love what you're up to as well. I'll let you introduce yourself and excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, and I want to give you like a real shout out here that you've worked with some incredible, really well-known names in this space and have been, I guess, the like secret power behind their clarity and their empire building. So I'm sure, as we know, business is a team sport. I'm sure there's lots of people involved, but from what I can tell, you're a really big part of their success. So maybe you share soon who some of those people are. From my side, I am first and foremost a coach. Like I help people make change, I help them figure out what they want, where they're going, and I really pivoted and not pivoted, but niched down into the world of business coaching, specifically for online business owners, coaches, consultants, thought leaders, people who have a real founder-led brand. And when that's the case, it's not about being an influencer and just selling your lifestyle, it's about selling your ideas. And so my speciality has become, yes, helping people feel confident and clear about what they're doing, but also tell stories about their work. And I do that in a couple of different ways. It's partly kind of strategy, business strategy, it's partly even down to like copy editing my clients' stuff if they need help with that. So it's pretty all-encompassing work. As we know, there's lots to this process of figuring out what you stand for, how to tell your story, and then grow a business and get clients as a result. And I take a pretty big role in that for my clients, both one-to-one, and I run Authority Club, which is really a community of people doing that at scale and becoming the go-to in their space. So loads of overlap. So yeah, a couple of sort of initial thoughts that we can jam on around like why do we think people need external help with this, with packaging ideas and frameworks? Like what are the common things people come to you frustrated and stuck with that they're like ready to invest, to get outside help?
Yeah, I'm sure some of these things will be similar kind of for the work that you do too. I think a big first one that comes to mind is the curse of knowledge, where when we're so close to what we do, we forget that although it might be obvious to us, it's not obvious to everyone. And because we spent years and years thinking about it, and it's also an innate ability and strength, superpower that we have, we don't realize how useful it is or how important it is or how to sort of break it down and explain it in a way that is accessible to more people, who are sort of at different stages of the journey, around your particular subject of expertise. And so working with someone who can see that, help you sort of spot it, extract it, clarify it, communicate it, um, and package it, um, just accelerates the process, because you can just be so close to it. And when you're juggling so many other things in the business, like marketing, doing the actual delivery of your service or product, um, it can be a lot of things. So it's a way to sort of accelerate and elevate that really core part of the business, because if you don't get that sort of clear, then you don't have a sort of a clear message, and then people can't understand what you do clearly, and it can be difficult to sort of build your business without having that sort of clarity in place.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And a few things you said that jumped out, and I see commonly it's like you said the curse of knowledge. We don't realize what's kind of innate to us and not clear to other people. And then another thing I see happen is that people get to this point where they're so consumed by what other peers in their space are saying that they start to assume that they have to come up with like the next level of insight beyond what's ever been said before, which ideally, you can push the kind of industry forward. But when you're starting out, it's okay to sort of share some of the same concepts of the other people, but share it in a way that's unique to you. And what I mean by that is if you are earlier in the journey, you're not creating content for your peers, you're creating it for the people who need to hear the advice. And so so many people get caught up in like, oh, is this the most unique, novel way of saying this ever and ever? And if not, let me like keep burrowing away in the background until it is. But we sharpen ideas in public. And so I don't know if you see that as well, like, or whether the people you work with are really genuinely, coming up with the most new insights all the time.
Yeah, I really like that nuance that you picked up there. I relate to that both personally and in my journey. And we can always be reminded of that. I think a common question with coaches, for example, they're like, but the methodology I teach or use is what I was trained in. So how can I communicate that differently? That's a common question. And I think to your point, I think the way you explain something is going to be unique to you, and any stories that you bring or mannerisms and qualities that you bring will just by default be unique and different just because you're sharing it, Ellen sharing it and Charlotte sharing it. So it's just going to by its own very nature be different. So sort of stepping into that, embracing yourself and just enjoying it just kind of just goes a long way. And then I think with that, there's also these different qualities. So, for example, I'm a very visual person. I was a professional artist for 10 years. And actually, how I got into this whole signature framework thing was because when I was a coach, I was just drawing out key concepts of what I was teaching. And I found that people got it much more easily. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just kind of keep doing that. And then I mean, it's a longer story, but I ended up doing what I'm doing now. So I think it's just leaning into who you are and how you explain it is enough. And then, as you say, as you practice it and do it more, you kind of refine that process, and it becomes your signature way of sharing it. Even like recording stuff on video and putting it on Instagram. The zoom of you like close up or a bit further away, like already that's different to someone else's video of
Yeah.
them explaining a similar concept. So there are so many details in the production to the way you describe something, to your unique personality, that can really come through.
Yeah. And as you're speaking, it's making me think we should maybe break down like this process a bit. So starting out, I guess somebody would know the general territory in which they're operating, then start to see themes and patterns in their client work. Let's call this person a consultant. Then they would start to say, well, let me share my intel outside of just like one-on-one sessions and share it in either newsletters, videos, books, or perhaps like a group course or a program. Therefore, for that to translate outside of a conversation, I need to be able to productize my knowledge in a way that scales. Again, I'm doing lots of air quotes, but because the process of getting to scale is quite manual. Like we have to test things and we have to almost go back to the drawing board, see what resonates. Um, and then over time, I think obviously a lot of people don't work with you or me. They do this on their own, right? They start to develop the things that they realize they're reusing a lot or are resonating the most, or they sharpen their own ideas and go deeper into those concepts. And then feel free to jump in here because this is more your domain. It's like, then how do you make those assets, whether it's a methodology or a video or um, key terminology, how do you make them more appealing visually, verbally, multimedia? And I think that's when, for example, like you say, maybe the way that you're communicating on video always looks the same because you're trying to have a repeatable format that people stick with. But a lot of people are trying to jump to that end point without really thinking about their ideas in the first place and the patterns that are true to their client base. And then I guess this is my way of saying it is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And the reason I believe people work with you at the stage they work with you at is that they've been trying to do, or they have been doing this work for a long time, but now they're ready to really accelerate their impact and take their existing audience and blow it up. And you can do that through really sticky, compelling visual video assets, for example. And I probably work with people a little bit earlier on in that journey when they're still maybe refining. They have expertise. I don't give them their 10-year history of career path or business, but I help them maybe go, what do I really want to be known for? And that is like a decision in itself. So yeah, curious what you would maybe add to that process, or the parts that you've got the most energy from.
Yeah, sure. I've actually, maybe I can kind of find it and grab it on the screen as we speak. I've actually kind of mapped out this journey
Amazing.
be-
Of course, you
because
have
it
a
is
visual for the visual conversation.
it's it is kind of a journey, quite an extensive journey. And I think I partly mapped it out because it's quite confusing, and there's I think so many moving parts, and it can be sort of underestimated. So I actually have found it here. I think this kind of explains it quite well. So
Amazing.
um
We love a mirror.
so indeed. So I think the sort of point is you know where we sort of start developing, a sort of, we at the beginning, like there's a sort of a pain point, a need, a curiosity, a desire, and you don't know how to do sort of X, or you say, oh, I want to, become a coach in this or consultant in this. And so you sort of have questions, or you have challenges, there's assumptions, there's emotions like excited, curious, overwhelmed, lots of information. um, you kind of want to know more, so you sort of investigate, you wonder, you notice, you research, you speak to others, you commit. And so the opportunity, so even at this really early stage, and I imagine this, this is before they, start sort of engaging with what you offer, and the resources you share. Even at this really early stage, there's an opportunity to share your findings,
Yeah.
and to compare and contrast approaches. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm so beginner, so I don't know anything. Like there's nothing I can share, but your summaries of what you're consuming, your reviews, your comparisons, your creation of resources, tips, and techniques that you find is useful, and you can kind of share and report on those ideas to others. Um, and so it's not sort of a question of credibility, and people have the mistaken belief at this stage that they have nothing to contribute. Um, so I like to sort of acknowledge that stage, because that stage is often underestimated. Yeah, if people did do that, it actually sort of accelerates the next process, which is a sort of, I want to, double down on this topic or
Mhm.
this specialism. And and then you start to sort of be able to do it for yourself, so you start to be more tangible with your questions, of like, where do I start? What do I need to know? What do I know? What don't I know?
Yes.
What prior knowledge or skills can I build on? Um, and there's lots of emotions, that sort of come with it, like this is gonna be great, it's gonna be fun, it's harder, oh gosh, it's actually quite good work, oh gosh, that sort of cycle of despair, it still sucks. So you kind of keep going. I think a lot of people are in this
Yeah.
for a long time, and it continues, but you sort of continue with dips, but a lot of people can kind of get lost in this. And I think I share this because most people are just in this limbo, and it's just useful to know that is part of the process and
Yeah.
totally the thing. And that is how you learn and how you end up sort of getting it.
I'm so glad you said that, because it sounds, because we're talking about information and facts and knowledge, it sounds like it should be quite a rational process. But it's so emotional because of the identity that is tied to this work of who am I to be an expert and share what I know and have people listen and maybe make money from it. And I'm not saying people should feel like that, but they do. And therefore, they can stay in that despair, they're still stuck. And that's where, again, not that this is just a big pitch for my work, but it's so relevant to what I do every single day, which is helping people believe that they have something valuable, but also take them out of that slump when they're feeling a bit low and overthinking, because that's what happens in this slump. It's not, I just feel bad about myself. It's, oh, I feel bad about myself, therefore the ideas aren't strong enough. Therefore, I need to go back to the drawing board. When actually it's just about building the muscle of self-belief and clarifying your ideas and sharpening your ideas, because I'm sure they can always be stronger. But it's like doing both at the same time. And that's where having somebody like you or I around for that process gives people the sense of like, oh yeah, I'm not crazy for thinking this is like a bad idea. This is part of the artist's journey, like The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. If anyone knows that book, it's like a prime example of like the literal war that goes on in our brain when we try and do creative, intellectually fulfilling work. So this is so interesting to see, and it just really proves how non-linear the process is.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. So I was a professional artist, and I sort of my art career was sort of a 10 year sort of period. So the professional bit was more at the latter end, just to be clear. It wasn't like a professional artist for 10 years. It was more in the final few years where I was fortunate to sell artwork. And actually, I went to university, studied art, and some people are like, what are you going to do with that degree? But I think if I got anything out of it, it was the trust the creative process, trust the unknown, and build the muscle, as you say, of going through this time and time and again, and knowing it's okay that that you're going to have those up and down days and all of that, and that practice is actually so powerful. So I kind of ended up figuring this out by chance, through my sort of early years. And also I kind of did a lot of mind mapping at that stage. And so in this sort of next phase here, we are kind of sense making, learning, we're seeing, we're trying, we're sharing. And as you sort of progress through this phase, you develop that expertise, you develop that muscle, and you share kind of with others. And perhaps you have more confidence to share it because you've kind of got a wider base of knowledge.
Yeah.
And you can share that through, YouTube, newsletter, social media posts, etc. And as you share that with the audience, you and reflect, you offer that to the audience, but you build this muscle of seeing, trying, sharing, and reflecting. And that's
Yeah.
basically how you learn and how you grow and develop your expertise in this learn and practice loop. And what I am suggesting is that if you were to create diagrams and frameworks in parallel to this learning process that you're already doing, you accelerate your learning and your ability to sort of synthesize and understand what your expertise is. And that is useful at this stage, but it also gives you these tools for later when you kind of decide and sort of focus on professionalizing your expertise and career.
Hmm. I like that element that maybe some people underestimate, which is the like meta learning component. So we learn about our domain, whether it's whatever sponsorships, which I know is one of your clients, or like relationships or mindset, but then we have to learn about learning those things and learn about learning them for ourselves and not in school, not from an employer, and then apply. So really just reiterating that this visual is great and clear to me anyway. So nice.
Yeah. And I think what you do is you sort of start shaping your thinking from all these different disconnected ideas, and you sort of build your wardrobe of knowledge. Um, and so you can kind of start creating more simple diagrams. And then it's over time that you develop kind of your framework and kind of give it a name. And again, the mistaken belief, even at this stage, is that what you share is not valuable to others, but it is. And as you refine your thinking more, it yeah, it just gets stronger and stronger. And really, as you sort of transition to this, you start helping people do it one to one, and then you start helping people to do it at scale. So to sort of to come back to your original sort of question, I think um, people have kind of gone through this incredible journey. They've garnered all these insights, made all these mistakes, and persisted through the process. And that, I mean, that deserves a badge in its own right. um, and then it's, as you're sharing and you're realizing other people are finding this valuable and useful too, as you say, with your work, it's like, okay, but how do I turn this into a business?
Yeah.
How can I make this sustainable for me and the sort of lifestyle I want to create? And those questions, we're not often these skills, we have to learn, and that's a whole learning journey as well in its own
Well,
right. So to have that sort of guidance and clarity and awareness for sort of the different models and how to sort of monetize all this experience that you can share and offer others is a whole other question. Um, and um, and there's so many ways of positioning yourself, and there's lots of different perspectives that you can offer, but which one is also going to stand out and be valuable and most useful, in your field and in the sort of marketplace. So there's a lot of different questions to share there, and that can be difficult to navigate. And I can imagine how helpful it is for you with your work to be able to sort of think about that and sort of navigate that together. And then once that sort of decision is made, what I can help with is really accelerate the communication and understanding of that perspective, and how you have how you can offer and share your unique approach to achieve the sort of goals and dreams and desires that your audience have with your help.
yeah. Yeah, very, very cool. And maybe this is a great time to just hear from you some of those like case studies, maybe the more well-known people you've worked with, just to elaborate on what that looks like at sort of scale.
Thank you. Yeah, so probably the most well-known client that I've worked with is Ali Abdaal. He's a YouTuber, a former doctor, an author, and also runs several sort of online group communities and programs. So I've worked with him in a number of projects. One of the current projects that we're looking at is his book, actually, Feel Good Productivity. And it's a prime example where there's actually 52 experiments in his book, Feel Good Productivity. His whole premise, also coming from a doctor sort of scientific background, is to kind of experiment your way through what feels good. And when you feel good, you're just more joyful and more productive, versus sort of working hard and being productive in that sort of way. And so, his example, who's, even someone like him who's very versed at communicating his ideas and obviously very successful with it, even he, with his book, there's just so much text. It's not easy to sort of understand what's in the book. The most information you have is a table of contents, which is very basic. And so we're helping him sort of create visuals so he can communicate the concepts of the book more widely and more easily to more people, which helps him because people then can understand his ideas more readily. And it helps his audience because they can, with that understanding, action it more readily and get the results that they're looking for, which is then this like just great flywheel, because then they share and recommend the book, and he gets to reach more people through that word of mouth.
Yeah, the virtuous cycle. And what were one of the earlier projects that you helped Ali with?
Part-time YouTuber Academy. So we met each other through a common sort of community that we were in. And when he was looking to start it out on, it's a typical imposter, everyone has imposter syndrome, including Ali Abdaal. When we first sort of, he kind of shared what he was up to, and I was like, well, if some people get it, that'll be a win. Some people buy the course, for cohort one. I was like, Ali, you're going to be fine. Don't worry, don't worry. It's like, and yeah, I mean, it's completely changed his life and his business.
Yeah, pretty incredible. It's so funny when people say things like, Oh, have you ever heard of Ali Abdaal? Or like they say like another like big name in the online space, you're like, yes. It's like the celebrities that walk amongst online business owners, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure he's now transcended into the offline fame world as well, but very cool. And what about you? Like maybe we can both talk to our own businesses and how we think about this stuff. I can go first, or yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
go ahead.
I'll go first, shall I? So I think the interesting conundrum, so to speak, that I've been through is like I trained, or at least I worked in career search, headhunting, recruitment. Then I worked for a startup accelerator, and one of the things that was really pivotal to my life was going through that kind of career transition. And I really like read the books, did the thinking around like how do you transition careers? How do you transfer your skills and get other people to really take you seriously when you don't have like the on paper right expertise? And so I became, I would say, like an expert in career transitions, but with a case study of one. And these ideas of how I did it and what I'd learned were kind of locked in my head. But then when I decided, literally fast forward like 3, 4 years, to be a coach, I wanted to be a career coach and help people do what I'd done. But again, these ideas were so just like baked in my like intuition or whatever we would call that. And then I trained as a coach. But when you train as a coach, you're not learning about careers or relationships. You're just learning about psychology and how to help people make change and ask good questions and so on. So I struggled a lot to reconcile like the training of coaching with the knowledge I had and build something more like bespoke around that. And that was what I did when I started my business to a degree that I always felt frustrated by. You know, I would always look at my work and be like, this is such a like poor version of what I could imagine it could be. But I didn't have the skills to like bring those concepts to life. And one of the best things I ever did was just start a weekly newsletter because that trained me to not only have a forcing function to like be in people's inboxes, but also to think clearly, what do I believe and how do I see this work? And soon my work transitioned from career coaching to business coaching because I was just so drawn to what I called like entrepreneurial careers, people leaving the 9 to 5, starting businesses. And nowadays I call myself business coach. Even within that, I call myself like, or I specialize in a specific type of business with a specific type of persona and transformation that I take people through to the point that I can now run a group membership teaching that stuff. But that's like 7 or 8 years of work in the making. And I have been tested, I suppose, in the last few months of trying to do this at even more of a scalable way because in the group program, unlike the first time I ran it, this time I'm running it asynchronously in that there's no start here, day one, we do this, day two, we do this. You know, it's more, here's the material. You're all at different points in your journey, so go through it in your own time. So the challenge for me has been putting that information in a way that people can like self-serve, you know? And where I'm at with it is that we have I call it a manifesto. It's basically a really chunky Google Doc with my advice, but then reflection points very frequently. So, like, stop. What do you think? What do you want to do here? And then on top of that, I have like the trainings and materials that I deliver live, and then those become recordings. And then I do one-to-one spot coaching on top for questions that come up. And so I share this because I'm in this process and I'm helping people in Authority Club to do that kind of thing for themselves. So it's super meta. And I feel like there's still so much to learn about how to know which frameworks are going to be the best, most valuable ones, and then is the format the right format. But yeah, I'm curious, maybe you have feedback for me. Like, what does that like process sound like from an expert's perspective?
Sure, sure. Thanks for sharing. It's great to hear the journey and how you've been exploring ways to help people learn and sort of transform and grow to become the expert businesses they can be.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I mean, a huge part of my experience to sort of get to this point of signature frameworks is learning design. So I'm self-taught learning designer from having worked behind lots of big courses and a variety of kind of learning formats. And something that you could explore and experiment with is having sort of milestone
Mm,
in your program, and when they achieve a certain milestone, there's some sort of reward for that. So, for example, if one of the exercises is to create a statement around what they do,
exactly that.
um,
Yeah.
you could do like, okay, great. You could offer, they submit it and then you review it and give feedback.
I do
So
actually have this
you
exact
do that.
process.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay,
love it.
perfect.
Okay, cool. I'm
Yeah.
feeling it. No,
Awesome.
but please
So
carry on.
maybe, so
Yeah.
maybe there are, maybe review those and see how they're working and
Yeah.
get feedback on those, because often that kind of element of gamification, clear milestones, clear rewards, and sort of collective touch points as well, so they feel like they are connected and I'm not just doing it alone. So it sounds, which is great if that's what you're doing. So those are the things that can really cut the cloth and make the difference.
Yeah.
So sort of double click on those, review how they're doing, how they're working. And sometimes, we often we can often, like, it's like a once and done thing, but actually it's always like anything, it's continuous improvement. And so maybe getting feedback, there might be small tweaks that can actually make quite a big difference in the what sounds like an amazing program you've designed.
What I've loved is because everybody has the same training, let's call it, the manifesto. Yes, I can give my feedback and I do at exactly the way you described. Like it's like you unlock part two by submitting this first piece of work. I can give
Mhm.
my feedback, but so can they. Like they can be like helping each
Totally.
other with that and shaping each other's work. And what else was I going to say? It's gone from my head, but it was echoing what you were saying, and allowing people, like you say, the space to actually feel through it as well. Because you can write anything on a page, but one of the things that's so important about the work that we're talking about today is it's a spearhead that decides how you run your business and how you focus your energy and your time. So I always say to people, look, I'm not that bothered about this perfect sentence being like the most copy perfect sentence about what you do. The reason we're spending time on it, we're slowing down, is because if you can't answer this questions on this statement, you don't know what to focus on, you don't know what to sell, you don't know who to network with, how to like learn which events to go to, because every single part of this statement dictates like your ideal client, the transformation, how you get them there, and why it matters. So there's all your marketing in that one sentence. And so yeah, I think the one piece that maybe I'm missing a little bit of having heard you speak is that more like the celebration behind it. It is a win when you get that clarity. And I have to say, clarity, comes and goes, and you have to kind of make decisions and take it forward. And then maybe things will evolve in your business and you change that positioning. But I think a lot of people assume I just do the marketing, but actually it's so much about the lived experience of the positioning, and then how do you go and meet clients and make sales and define your business model. But I'll stop there because I'm curious about your own journey of
Thanks. Sure. Yeah. One thing I'll just say before I forget, that you might already do anyway, I just mentioned because you hadn't mentioned it, is um, you can also have sort of, there's like the person learning, and then there's person learning like with an accountability partner. So like pairing people, and you could possibly curate that so it isn't like completely random. And obviously, if it isn't a good pairing, people can always kind of come back to you and kind of review that. And then like a small group that meet and they, could self-facilitate with some prompts that you have, and then like a wider group where you sort of come together at certain sort of timelines. That format I've seen work pretty well in these sorts of sort of programs. And sometimes there can be something useful of having like a sort of a start point and end point. So you could have sort of boot camp or sort of sprints,
Mm,
and then and then a sort of, there is a sort of a beginning and end point, and however, it obviously is still the overarching sort of kind of annual sort of subscription that you might have, but a sprint or a sort of a doubling down on a particular element where people particularly can struggle with, can be fun to kind of mix into sometimes.
yeah, and all of these things are great. And then there's like the reducing overwhelm as well component, right? Because sometimes,
Mm.
as we know, as you've worked with so many people like me, when we build these scalable offers, it's like we want to give them everything, and actually too much of anything is a bad thing. So it's like fine tuning. So I've been doing lots of one-to-one calls in the community as of the last couple of weeks, just to be like, how what's working, what's not working, and so far so good, I have to say. But
Nice.
yeah, what about you then? As
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
finished to land, I'm curious how it's all been for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's totally meta my side too. And what is my signature framework? How am I communicating and presenting that to the world? Um, so I would say this business that I've been working on has been a 5-year business, and it initially was focused around self-assessments. And basically, when I help people create self-assessments, I always help them create a framework so that the self-assessment questions were based around a framework versus lots of random questions. And I realized that that was the really valuable bit. So basically created a structure of the intellectual property, a bit like that wardrobe image I shared with you. And that made it so that internal organization, that clarity made it so much easier for them to then figure out what their business, like to be like extra clear what their business is. They might already have an inkling and they sort of, things are going well, they got some perspective. But when you really define your methodology, it comes into extra focus for yourself, but also the journey that you then bring clients through in your productized service or product. Um, and and so with and then what I realized is like you might have your framework, but if you don't have a signature visual to communicate it, it can kind of get blended in with everything else because it doesn't really stand out, and the quality of your thinking isn't reflected in the quality of the design of the visual. And having that visual experience, that kind of background as an artist, that's a skill set that I have. And so I started doing more work in the actual visualization of the framework. And that's how my business has evolved. And so I had a framework on how to create an effective framework and self-assessment. And then I realized, okay, the framework is actually really important and really valuable. And so I've like double clicked on that because there's the nuances like now you have the framework, you basically have intellectual property. How do you register that? And actually, if you don't have visuals, you can't really register your intellectual property because anyone can put a bunch of words. It's the visual element that really defines what your intellectual property is and what can be registered. You can register and trademark certain phrases or words, but it's quite limited. The text element is actually the visual element and the colors and the logo combinations that help you really define and register your intellectual property. So I've been kind of double clicking on that and developing my kind of signature framework. And also something that's good to sort of understand is there's a sort of a primary signature framework, which is what people sort of see and know. So in my case, it's codify your unique approach, visualize your signature framework, and leverage your intellectual property. So there's kind of 3 key steps that are very quick and easy to understand. And then there's a secondary level, which is like, okay, so how do I actually codify my unique approach? How do I actually visualize the signature framework? And how do I actually leverage it, my intellectual
Leverage
property?
is like distribution and scale, or is it more that trademark piece?
So the kind of key components are the intellectual property element. That's like step number 1. So you want to put it out everywhere if you haven't protected yourself in the first place. And in double clicking on that, there's a quick, effective, secure legal solution that a lot of people don't know about. But as you specialize, you know and learn these things. And then there is the longer route, which is what most people think it is, where you have to go through several sort of legal steps. So there's a way to protect yourself quickly and get yourself out there readily. And then in parallel, at least you're protected. You can get everything out as you kind of go through the slightly longer process of protecting your intellectual property. So intellectual property is like a key step of that. Then there's how do you market your framework? How to use your framework in your sales materials and your sales conversations. And then there's how to use your framework in your products.
Yeah.
So that's a sort of secondary framework. And then there's a third level, a tertiary framework, which is like, okay, so how do I actually use my intellectual property and my framework in a book
Yeah.
versus how do I use it in a course? And there's sort of nuances on that. So there's like very like concrete frameworks that I share for like the actual sort of on the ground doing the doing of those
Mm.
particular elements. So
Frameworks
one
for you,
kind of
frameworks.
indeed, and I think it's useful to explain that structure. So a lot of people
Yeah.
don't realize that you can encapsulate a whole body of work in it and have these sort of zoom in and zoom out layers, and you can structure your body of work. So when people are ready to take in that layer of information or take or do those actions, those frameworks are there sort of available, but in a sort of nested way.
Yeah.
So to sort of be meta, that I've had to refine and develop my frameworks over time, also as my business has evolved, which is why I sort of share a bit more color into my journey. Um, and I'm at the stage now where I have the frameworks developed and refined over time, and it's always a lot of people say, does it ever finish? And I'm like, yes and no. So
Mm.
yes, there is a certain point where it's like this is solid,
Check.
and you can feel it. So it just kind of everything sort of clicks into place and it just flows. You do kind of feel it, especially after going through that windy journey before. You definitely know when you have clarity. It's actually very somatic.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that you aren't improving on it and tweaking it here and there. But that's great. Everything is a living, continuous kind of growing and learning,
Yeah.
document or thing. So where my sort of next opportunity is to communicate and share that more widely and show more, versus tell, um, how to use a signature framework to become that go-to expert in your field. Um, and for me, it's just a matter of time and just I know it all, and a lot of my clients have just totally kicked ass with it and done it super well. Justin Moore is a good example with his sponsorship world framework. Um, and kudos to him for getting an action. He's done that, more quickly and more readily than myself. So that's kind of where I'm at.
We're busy helping people to do it. You have to then treat yourself
Yeah,
as a client, don't you?
indeed. So it's all good, getting I mean I have a deck that communicates what I offer, but again, putting that to a website, just to sort of, yeah, make it more accessible and available to people. So yeah, just it's all there, but it's just, keeping it up and keeping it moving and demonstrating by example.
Well, you followed up with me straight away with the deck, and I was like, cool, I completely get what you're doing. Not that I didn't through a conversation, but 10x clarity when you see it laid out. So, like you say, you have the assets, it's just now scaling and sharing them. One thing I'm going to be doing over the next few weeks is like taking snippets from Authority Club trainings and turning them into video posts, right? Like marketing assets. It's like obvious that you can do that, but there's still nuances within that, like how much am I sharing? How much is it? So yeah, more questions, but super interesting. I feel like genuinely I could talk about this with you like all day. Such exciting
Totally.
stuff. But yeah, thanks for coming on the like Zoom on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's been really fun. I look forward to the next chat with you.
Yeah, Charlotte, see you around. Have a good rest of
Yeah,
your day.
thanks. Yeah, you too, Ellen. Bye bye.